You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG. Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries. It's a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games, where two GMs talk about the recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss starting in a gauntlet. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Matt, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Jody. Jody, how are you doing today?
Man, back from the plague and excited to be rolling dice and talking about Shadowdark.
You might say it was a bit of a gauntlet getting here. I mean...
Yeah, you could say that.
One could say that. But one would be wrong for doing so. So let's get on with the program. Jody, today's episode focuses on a recent session that you ran wherein we started in a gauntlet. You really, I mean, this was a shell game, no pun intended. So, Jody, take us to the table.
All right. So this takes us back to my ongoing Saltmarsh campaign. Coastal, indeed. Thus the shell game. We got it. That's killing me. And for that game, I was at what we refer to, Matt and I, as a crossroads episode, meaning the story could go in any direction from here. And I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to get into it. And it was also the end of a chunk of episodes. So I came up with a little bit of a crazy idea to use a gauntlet. And I drafted up a little opening scene. So maybe with some coastal birds and some coastal tunes, some waves lapping in the background. I'll take you through that opening scene now to set the mood, and then we'll unpack this thing. As the sun sets on the town of Saltmarsh, the fish processing plants close down, and the dock workers make their way home to families and taverns after a hard day's labor. The cool evening air will soon give way to summer heat, but for tonight the air is crisp and the sea is calm. Among the towering merchant ships and the smaller fishing boats that fill Saltmarsh's docks, a tiny raft makes its way. The passengers of the raft, though caked in mud and looking rather weary, carry an air of success and confidence about them. A thickly built Northman stoically guides the raft, under the watchful eye of a keen tutelage of a dwarf in a wide-brimmed hat. A woman in a long coat sits comfortably on the raft. A small bat clings to her shoulder as she hums a bewitching tune. A sea elf stands at the front of the raft. She moves in perfect rhythm with the waves. Her eyes scan the ships in the harbor intently as her white tattoos glisten in the sun. The raft is far too low and ramshackle to dock properly at the larger seafaring vessels, nor will any dockmaster authorize the mooring of such a craft, no matter how noble it may be. Instead, our intrepid heroes are directed to a dock at Crabber's Cove on the southern end of town. There, among the dilapidated buildings, the abandoned tiny dock sits quiet. Other than the crabs that give the cove its name, only a few beggars are present, gathered around a faint glow of a cook fire. Our heroes lash their stalwart craft to the docks and gather their packs to make their way into town for some much-needed rest and relaxation. The woman in the long coat assures them that they will be warmly welcomed at the snapping line, and her dwarven colleague seems keen to hear more about the local brew called Claw Wine. The group departs the docks and heads for town, but our camera stays fixed on the small craft. The sound of waves splashing on stone and the scuttling of crab claws fade as her focus shifts to the crackling sound of the campfire and 4 poor souls gathered there. Hard streets and tough times make for uneasy alliances, and these 4 strangers have found companionship as they pass through Saltmarsh, headed their separate ways. A good day of panhandling has produced a bottle of swill to share and a crusty bit of bread to soak up the alcohol. The crabs will make the meal yet again.
All right, Jody. A couple things right off the bat. First of all, excellent little narrative there. There's a couple things I want to kind of tease out. But second of all, the purpose of this was to start the session with a gauntlet. And the way that you did that was by basically onboarding 4 new characters without our knowledge and requiring us to play them basically handed us his level 0 character sheet and said, "You're now playing these beggars." Talk to me about, like, let's just start with the why. Why do this other than I have not done this. I would never think to do this. I will say from the get-go, I thought it was really cool. But why did you want to try this in this moment, other than it being a quote-unquote crossroads kind of a situation?
Yeah, it's kind of a weaving thought process that got me to this consideration of, do I just throw you guys these level 0 characters? So what you just heard, listeners, is the description of the elf, the dwarf, the woman, and the Northman. Those are our 4 primary antagonists, or the 4 antagonists, or protagonists, excuse me. It depends on who you ask, I suppose.
I mean, ask the GM, and the players are always the antagonists.
That's right. But that's our regular play group for this session. Those 4 players were going to gather, and those characters were present. So I needed to quote you, move the lens away from them. But I had to give them their moment in the sun of their glorious, victorious return to Saltmarsh. And what I found in my prep in considering this Crossroads episode is I knew I needed to give you guys new pathways to explore. I knew I needed to lore dump, but I also wanted to highlight some very specific and different areas of the town of Saltmarsh. And if I left it to you all, you would not hang out on the Stinky Crabber Cove docks with stinky crabs, that nobody goes there and it's all dilapidated and falling apart. That would not be. You have inns at very nice taverns to go stay at, and your characters with a lot of coin. So anything that I kept coming up with felt really unsatisfying narratively to how do I get your characters in their current state to start immediately engaging with new and interesting story arcs, or see a new part of the town, or present something new for them to explore. And I kind of got the idea of, well, what if I just make it new people, that there are new people, but then forcing players to play characters that these aren't the people you've invested in. You've been stoked to play your existing characters. They're leveling up. They've gained some magic items. They're exploring the wonders of the world. They have a payday to go get. You know, these are all valid considerations. And I knew I wanted to give you those things, but I think this was the core thing as I'm rambling through this answer, is I wanted you guys to see more of Saltmarsh. And one of my current goals is to continue to return to this town so that this town grows into a living, breathing place. I want the town to be a character. And while I could have you talk to various NPCs, that is not a strength of mine as a GM. I'm not horrible at it, but I am not excellent at extemporaneous communication as 6 different people. I'm not one of those kind of GMs. So I needed to set a scene and create an adventure that would allow you to see a new part of the town. So shifting over to these 4 transient folk passing through and giving them a different scope on what's going on and a different lens on the town, so that it's not just your one character's perspective, ended up being the hook, and where my planning and development decided, no, that'll do the thing. It'll give me new information and new things for you guys to see. And a few little breadcrumbs got dropped in of things you already knew.
So the way this worked, at least from my perspective, and I want to point out something that you did in the introduction to this session. So you read a pre-prepared narrative of us getting off the ship. And I know that there's GMs that would bristle and possibly go, I would never do that. Mm-hmm. I'd never just read to my players. I get that. I don't know. I'm of two minds. I know that, sometimes it can be tedious, and if the writing is bad or whatever. This, I thought, was deftly done. And there's a moment that I think, and of course I would think this because I like thinking about RPGs in this way, where you say, these 4 characters leave, but our camera stays on these 4 beggars. And I don't know. I wanted to ask you about, I have a propensity to think about scenes and describe my game in a very cinematic way. Like I use a lot of cinematic terms. I use the word camera. Like I'm pretty blatant about this, and you in the past haven't been. Was that a deliberate choice? Were you just playing to the crowd? Jody just wanted to really get me on board in this session and really or because I thought, and again I'm biased, but I thought that worked really well as both a transition for the scene, but also for us as players.
Yes, is the answer to all of those questions. So, like, what I want to highlight here is. And I don't remember even what the context of the conversation was that happened. It was over on Facebook. And somebody asked a question. And my response was, that's fine. But remember, there's no one size fits all. Like, you're just developing a toolkit. And, you know, famously early in our starting to play RPGs together, you were like, man, DMing is a lot like teaching. And as you're a teacher, your journey is developing, and it's referred to this way, as your toolkit as a teacher, how to manage a classroom. You gain different tricks and tips and how to teach a concept, and you find different avenues of access, of understanding on a concept. You just keep developing that bag of tricks. Like, I think like any profession, this is probably true. Certainly the trades, this is true. How do you fix this problem? Well, there's a lot of ways to fix it. What's the right way? In this instance, the talking about a camera and framing a scene in that way, and knowing that I was literally just going to begin with an opening scene. It is not an interaction point. There is nothing here for you guys to do. Could I have played out the NPC interaction with you guys being told by a dockmaster that no, you can't stick your very noble but very ramshackle boat in here with merchant vessels and get the hell out of here? We could have done that.
Ramshackle boat, Jody.
I know.
It's a beautiful raft.
I know you would have enjoyed doing that, as I think the party would have.
Yeah.
But it was the question of what is the right tool for this move. And in terms of writing, there was some very clear things I did there. I set literally the physical scene of you're in Salt Marsh, you're on the boat, you're coming down. I gave a pop to my players because once I described the Northman at the helm, everybody instinctively as a player, I would go, and what's he going to say about my character? How's the GM going to describe my character back to me? That's always fun. So each of you got your own little pop on the boat of you're on the raft as you come into town. And then I had to get to the point of, okay, so you guys are going to leave and you're going to go to town. So your characters are okay. They're going to a nice posh place. And
don't worry about them.
You know, I was worried because I spoke for your character a little bit but I felt safe knowing that Ungard would be curious about claw wine and the snapping line,
yeah, for
which
sure.
is nice.
He's
an inquisitive dude.
Yeah.
So and you know that the witch, you know, my wife's character has an in there. So I gave your characters their due scene time, and then went, and now to end when we do get into playing, very quickly go. And now we're moving the camera away from them. They're okay. They're safe. They're going to carouse. And then I panned over to these folks and said, here. And I just used Shadow Darklings to generate 4 level 0s, which it'll do in a pop. And I just kept hitting refresh till I got 4 people that felt like, oh, these feel right. And then there was some serendipity there of they really lined up to, I know, player propensities and choices for the unfolding of the scene that I wanted to have.
So let's talk about the characters and how you went about starting the scene, right? Because I don't feel like the rug got pulled out from under us, but I do feel like this was, we're doing something different. Mm-hmm. And as a GM, you know that ahead of time. As players, we were finding out kind of in the moment. So you hand out these level 0 character sheets. And they are kind of serendipitously somewhat aligned with our propensities as players. And what was your expectation of what would happen next? Were you thinking, did you think we were going to treat these as disposable PCs because they're level 0s, or because we didn't, and not to bury the lead.
No, you guys definitely didn't. It was deeply enjoyable that you didn't.
But what was your I mean, maybe you didn't have any expectations, but like, what was your expectation in terms of how we would get up and running? Because I do feel like maybe it took a little longer than you were expecting, or maybe not. I don't know. We had some questions, and we took some time to kind of get into character, and which, this is the way that our group plays. And I just want to make mention, like, this might not be to everyone's taste, but this is for people sitting around thinking deeply about the inner thoughts of their level 0 throwaway characters.
Right.
And we all did it kind of just without you prompting. So,
well, that happened. And once I saw that happening, so I'll be honest, in my prep, this moment was the thing I was most nervous about. I did tell you all well in advance of, I'm going to try something weird today. Try and play along.
You did let us know that we were going to.
Something weird's good. We're doing something different. So try and be good sports, and we'll see how it goes. And I think that's important. And that's a skill I've learned from you about that. Really, don't pull the rug out under their feet. Be like, I'm going to pull the rug. The rug is going away. And now here is, trust me that I know this is.
Where'd the rug
go? So that moment was, how will we, and you gather at a tavern. You can talk to each other now if you want to, for those who know the Dr. Demento skit. And you guys jumped in earnestly and adopted those characters and gave them voices and grabbed onto the minimal amount of information that is a level 0 character, which is frankly really important here. I think the fact that they were level 0 made that a much smaller jump, because as experienced Shadow Dark players, you knew, I do have a background. Okay, what's my character's background? Okay, the general worldly politics of the campaign setting, so you could ask some leading questions. You had some questions about, hey, from the south, is there a spot, or where would there be war, because this guy's got his background and he's level 0 and maybe he's from here, and this and this. Okay, cool, I'll run with that. And then I knew there was going to be an inciting moment. It did take longer to get to the inciting moment that I expected, but that was because you guys were enjoying exploring these characters.
We're just role-playing a character around a fire.
Right. And it was, not every group's going to do that. And if I felt like that scene was flagging and you guys weren't grabbing the reins and just going, I would have cut to, okay, and you guys take sleep and the bottle finds you. And I did have a dice roll that we jumped to pretty quickly about so you're drinking a bottle of swill, cooking the crabs that are all over Crabber's Cove, scurrying around uncaught, and a little crust of bread. It's going to have an effect that you're all downing bottles of this stuff from your day's collection.
Sure.
And so let's make a constitution check and see who's doing the best and who's not doing so well. And then I can leverage that ordering into the watch and how events unfold over the evening. And I had a thing was going to happen at night to get the scene up and running and going. Yeah. So start the gauntlet, as it were. And then at that point, it was play to find out. And I was like, I'd like this to go about maximum 2 hours would be the max, because we played about a 4-hour session. So I didn't want it to go longer than that, because we did need to get back to your characters. That was the other, I have to get you guys back to, we had rolled, this is really important actually, is we had rolled carousing at the end of last session. And I had told you guys, hey, we're going to play out your carousing to some extent. Yeah. Right? I want to actually play the carousing, a thing we talked about in our carousing episode a while back, of actually play. We know what's going to happen because we've already rolled carousing, but let's go ahead and play that out and see how it plays out. And that worked out great later in the episode too, or the session. But I couldn't give the whole episode to these characters. So I knew for me, that's a good thing as a GM, is I have a ticking clock. I only have so long I can spend with these folks. I got to keep moving them towards an inevitable point of something happens. So, but once you guys were up and running and I saw you had latched on and you were enjoying that these passer throughs in Saltmarsh were going to have personalities and lives and bonds and things to do, then, at that point it was play to find out. And I knew what the beats were and how it would go and just who stumbles onto which beat. And it just worked out great.
So from my perspective, I want to kind of throw a couple of things that I noticed or that I experienced at you, and you can tell me kind of where they land. So first of all, I find it liberating to get a really crap character that's a throwaway. I don't know. Do you have this feeling? I wonder if listeners do, where some of my favorite characters are one-shot characters not because they were throwaways, but I think because I maybe took some risks knowing that I wasn't going to have to commit to this character long term, and then I just kind of had like less inhibitions. Like, I want to go back and play this character now. Like, I actually feel like there's some substance there. Like, I was able to find some things in this character, and like, Shatterark dude could die if I decided for him to pick up a sword again or whatever, but like, I would love to play a session or two with this guy. Do you feel like, though, that one-shots or disposable characters yield better or just more interesting results, or has that been your experience? Because that's kind of been my experience to a certain degree.
That's it. I think that's a really interesting question, because what I was pondering as you were describing that question and those experiences, I have in my head this like a million people do. There's the metrics of how do you monitor your players? How do you think about your players? How I know when you're at my table, I need to make sure somewhere there is an NPC who's going to be somebody you can talk to and will deliver some lore. That is, you Matt as a player wants that to happen. Like, that is a thing. Yeah. If I like it. One of our other players is at the table, I need something dark and spooky or creepy. Something like that needs to happen. For another player, I am learning that if the cogs of the world turn, that does it for them. They like seeing the world tick forward. That's a thing they enjoy. So we all have these metrics we watch players play with. And another one is that I've learned is some people come to the table and the character, they're working really hard as a player to generate a character. That they have a concept, and the concept is the goal, right? That this character is about this, and that's the goal. Other players, it is play to discover the character. Right. I have made a character. I don't give a crap who they are until I am 4, 5, or 6 sessions in, and things have happened, and now I have lived with this person, and the answers I was giving in the moment started to shape a character. So the original question you asked that was very reasonable about why do one-shots sometimes feel more attached is they demand each kind of player to meet in the middle. That if you are a concept player, I am acknowledging your desire to have, and I think you're a concept player.
100%.
Right. You
as much as I don't want to admit it, I'm a filthy theater kid concept guy.
Yeah. Totally. For a non-theater, you are.
I don't. No disparagement the theater kids, but I got some theater kid energy, man.
Right, and because I think in this metric, when I play, I try and push myself to the middle. Sometimes the character presents a concept very quickly, and I latch onto it, and it becomes its own thing. What's funny is I find those characters end up playing away from me, which can be frustrating.
Interesting, yeah.
Whereas play to find out characters always play closer to me, and I connect with them a little more deeply. So I am clearly of the play to find out pool if that's happening. But when you play one shot, if you're a concept player that you go, this is my character and this is what I'm going for, it's demanding that, and it's making that decision not only safe, but it's beneficial because it helps the story move. Your character and the voice you found, thank you, the Expanse.
Yeah, the Belter pigeon sort of accent.
And a piece of my world was born that I was like, I know where in my world that accent would show up, and I know why it would show up. I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. I love that. This is how my
welcome, Jody.
Yeah, no, that's how my world building happens. Is the players do something, and I'm like, oh my god, click, that Lego piece fits right. That's the puzzle piece I needed. So I can't wait for whenever it is we play in that very distant part of the map. Perfect. And why that character spoke that way. Whereas for the play to find out characters, the one shot is really interesting because the players who are concept players will drag and give support to the play to find out. My wife is problematically at times maximally play to find out.
Sure.
I've mentioned on the show before that she plays in the third person for quite a while. The witch with the bat hanging off her is her character in the opening scene. That character jumped onto the page more than most do for her. And it's weird because it's like a big departure for her in some ways.
Yeah, it's a high charisma character. She's like very, very talkative and
like welcoming and not usually my wife's characters are kind of bristly and cold, and this witch is not. She is very much, and it's been fun watching her do that. So the concept came round. So I think this is a very rambly answer, but I think it was relevant here for a Gauntlet to go, I know I'm leveraging that because I know my players well, and I know that when I saw one of the characters, I guess I was being cagey about this. And I'm like, wait, we finished the thing. I don't need to hold anything back. One of the characters happened to have a chaotic alignment. And I was like, oh, this player will love that. And that will play really well into this particular scene. So in my planning, I knew there were some things I could play with alignment as the scene unfolded, that most were neutral.
You and your damn alignment, Jody.
I do love me some alignment. Hey, there was a door there. And you guys, that there were voices in the dark. And then your character was talking to this NPC who's like, hey, come down. Tell me. I'll tell you all the lore you want. Just come down here and visit me. And your guy had reasonable good sense and said no. And, that the scene just continued to unfold. But yeah, that notion of a one shot and why, that's my why on the attachment piece. And then also as a GM, like, how do you leverage that? Encourage the players who are the concept players to do just that. Give them what they need so that they can be the theater kid, because they will buoy the scene, and the play to find out folks will latch on and come with. They aren't going to just stick their, sword in the ground and say, I'll go this far and no farther. That makes for not, that's how you lose at D&D.
So, okay, I actually want to stay on this topic. This is going to take us a little bit away from kind of the core of the episode, starting with the Gauntlet. So I actually want to get back to some of the nuts and bolts. But I want to take a moment here to ask you. So I can imagine someone coming from 5th edition, they find Shadowdark, and some of the first advice that is given to players and is given to GMs is, hold on to your characters loosely, or, be prepared for lethality or whatever. And I wanted to ask you about, so none of the characters died.
Nope. Much to my shock.
Right. And I think both you and I are pretty solidly on record as saying that character death is not the same thing as lethality or high levels of danger, right? You don't need a high body count for your game to have stakes, right? But in a 0-level Gauntlet, there are supposed to be, kind of just generally, and the culture of Gauntlets is a high body count where you're supposed to churn through, everyone, you better have 24 sheets so that everyone can have, have many characters, right? Well, we kind of just flipped that on its head and played very cautiously. We cared about these characters. I just wonder, I don't even know what my question is. I just want to ask you, is that okay? Do you think there's a certain part of me that feels that Shadowdark and the culture that is built around it is an attempt and a departure from an attempt to get away from the character focused game of specifically D&D 5th edition, 2014 and by extension 2024, that you see so much animosity to my player brought a 15-page backstory, and you see a lot of animosity to what I will colloquially and kind of just, pejoratively called theater kid energy, while also owning that I have that kind of earnest character, what is my motivation? So I don't know, where does... This was such an interesting insight for me into both myself as a player, but also into the people I was playing with. Did any of that, did this spark any thoughts about that as a central core issue of an OSR game, or, whatever Shadowdark is, whatever you want to call it? Do you have any thoughts on that were spurred on by what happened in this, given the fact that we made decisions about our characters very quickly and we also played them very cautiously? Where are you on that?
So for my campaign, I'm going to jump to that and then come back to your actual question. For my campaign, I was delighted that you played them so cautiously, because that means when you interacted with the town guards, you knew that wasn't entirely safe for those characters.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That was precarious, that most of you had 1 hit point. Somebody I remember being
I thought that
really
dude was
stoked.
Stab me.
Being really stoked that when, one of the characters woke up and there was a strange creature looming over her with a bloody-handed knife and a like weird, like nice glove on the other hand, and was like twitching and muttering to itself. And then she was like, I'm going to try and talk my way out of this. And then took the knife away from the thing, and through some really good role play and charisma rolls going the right way. And yeah, that said to me that the world was presenting itself in the way I wanted it to, right? It's always the weirdest thing with RPGs is that as a GM, you have a story in your head and a world in your head, and you are sharing, be it a deep, dark dungeon in the Shadowdark or a beautiful fairy tale castle or a strange kind of foreboding but also whimsical magical woods. You as the GM have a picture, and then you are putting a picture in everybody around you's head, and the picture that is in their head is at once the same and different than what you're describing. And when it's magic and role-playing it is its very, very best, those pictures are very, very similar. And when it's really bad and really frustrating, those pictures are very different. So I was delighted with the way you guys were playing, because it said that Saltmarsh as a place and for this chunk of the town felt the way I wanted it to feel. Not immediately dangerous and foreboding, but that caution was needed. Things were happening that were beyond you and could be interacted with carefully. To your larger question, and why I go through all that, is I bristle a little bit at the discussion around Shadowdark and its lethality. Compared to modern D&D, where there are death saves and a preponderance of spellcasting ability, death is pretty uncommon. And that mechanically makes the focus of the game. The characters are going to survive, so we can tell more heroic stories because we don't have to worry about them dying.
Sure.
Where I reject the concept, when we flip it over to Shadowdark and OSR, is so because characters can die if they drop to 0 hit points, and that might be it, and there's not a lot of free healing around, and that suddenly that means we can't tell character-driven stories. And it's there isn't even a correlation there. The causation, nothing. Like that logic is such a slippery slope fallacy that we go from like, oh, because you can drop to 0 and die, we can't tell a character story. Right. No, that just doesn't work that way. Like, here's an example of 3 characters with 1 hit point that interacted with something that was clearly way more powerful than them in an arcane lock behind only a lawful character could open it. And the thing behind the door is calling out to the lawful character to come open the door and just carry me out and we'll be fine. And the chaotic character was like overcome and having a real hard time, but the thing really liked talking to it. Like, there are some stakes at play here when we start looking at what kind of critters might do that and can project their voice to the middle of the night to the drunk guy next door. And so those are very characterful scenes. And the lethality requires that players engage with the world in a certain way that I think is generally representative of OSR play, that caution and thoughtfulness is required, where in a modern D&D game, heroic bravado might be a more appropriate or is an equally valid answer. Both are valid answers. It's just in an OSR game, if you choose heroic bravado, are you willing to take a very real world consequence?
Yeah.
If you see somebody lipping off in real life at a parking lot and you choose to go say something to them, you might be right. The consequences might be unfair, or they might not be.
Oh, I like that framing a lot. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because much can be said about, character-driven games, whatever. But I don't actually, you have said this, maybe on the program, maybe not, but that you don't really actually run a character-focused game. You run a world-focused game. And I've objected to that a little bit over the years because you do care about the characters and...
See, the opening scene I just read.
Yeah. But here's the thing that I want to bring it back to Shadow Dark and back to the actual situation at hand. At any point, you could have, maybe not at any point, but almost any point, you could have had something happen. Something comes out of the water in the middle of the night and stabs one of us in the chest and we die. We're a level 1 Gauntlet character. And no one would have batted an eye, probably, right? Like, people would have been like, whoa, and maybe expected another character sheet or something. But I think it would have been well within your right to just off a level 0 character, especially because we were just faffing around.
Right.
But you didn't do that. And I think that this is what I wanted to add to your thing about character-driven stories is that I think all too often that there is this strange thing that happens where if you're a GM running an OSR game, people just get it through their head, and maybe it's because it's the kind of game that they like. I don't want to deny anybody the kind of game that they like, but that there needs to be death, that death needs to happen. And so there's 1,001 ways to manufacture death as a GM. And some of those ways you can wrap in a bunch of logic and reason and rationalization to make it seem and actually be totally reasonable that a character died. But it is ostensibly the same thing as Rock's Fall, your character dies.
Yeah.
And
had a Sahagwin come up out of the water and claimed one of you or all of you,
sure,
you guys would have been like, oh, that sucks, but okay, cool, noted.
Right. And you actually could have gotten some of your lore delivered that way, right? You could have...
you guys actually, weirdly, your regular characters would have been stoked to know that. Yeah.
I mean, as players, we're in this... I actually want to talk about this in a little bit. We're in this kind of very interesting place where we have some meta knowledge that our main kind of primary characters don't know. That is very cool and something I actually really like. I know I feel like I'm just a broken record here, but I know not every table might like that. But I really like as a player, and as a GM, that when players have meta knowledge that their characters wouldn't, and there's like that inner turmoil as a player. I value that. I like it.
Yeah, I like the puzzle. How do I get my character to know what I know?
Right, and sometimes you just can't, and you're like, well, oh well. So all that said, and that digression aside, I wanna ask you, the thing that felt the only I want to give you my feedback.
Yeah,
and
please.
then I want to give you my one critique, and I want you to kind of tell me what you think about it. So I felt like I didn't fully understand what the purpose of this was.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't. And that is likely okay. Like, I trust you that there was information there that was important, and I sort of can maybe read through the lines a little bit. But I did feel like the information was gated behind probably killing a character or all of us in this situation. Maybe not. But from my perspective, there were moments where I was like, gosh, we're spending a lot of table time on this. So therefore, there must be some amount of significance to it if this was a decision that Jody made. And I felt like it was unclear to me what the quote unquote purpose was, aside from delivering lore.
Mm-hmm.
And you have stated very clearly that like that was its primary purpose.
Right.
So,
and even lore in the broad sense of texture of the world, not like actionable lore.
Right. Totally. And so that's my only feedback, is that I did feel in certain points where I was like, we were investing table time in this, which I know is like a meta thing in my GM brain, kind of going, I'm like, oh, we're spending a lot of time on this. I want to make sure that, like that as a player, I want to invest. If we're spending a lot of time, I want to invest my time, energy, and thought and effort into engaging with what's going on here. But I'm not really sure what the purpose is. So I assume you're kind of like fine with that. But was that something you thought about? Were you concerned about? Where are you on that?
I think that's totally valid. If I were to do this again, because again, see earlier caveat of like, hey, I am trying something I haven't done before. Totally. And I think if I were to try this again, and this is a gimmick, like I also want to be real clear with folks, this was a gimmick.
You're not going to start every session with it.
No, this like I can't. I would be dubious of doing this again in the next 10 sessions, right? Yeah. Like this is you get to do it once in a while. And as such, I probably could have better leveraged that to create more actionable lore for your characters than I did. In my trying something new and enjoying the idea, and there's no spoiler other than just conceptual.
Oh boy.
Breadcrumbing, which is what I was doing. That scene was laying out bits that future you may or may not find useful. And that is what it was, because, and this is where we get to kind of the zooming out and moving on to our other characters, is it was a crossroad episode and I needed to give you seeds, and the pieces of the world you did interact with were seeds for future possible exploration and consideration. So this very weird thing, it's good because it's weird, so that'll stick. Its novelty will stick of like, that was kind of weird. Oh, well. And then we're back to our other characters. And by the end of the session, we were so wildly removed from these four folks who went off to be questioned by town guards and are probably in the stockade. That, I mean, like they were, by the end of the session, they were such an afterthought, which is what they needed to also be, right? We needed to have them seem real and believable and live in the town, and then they need to exit the stage and be forgotten. And I think I could have more packed our time spent, as I said, because you all were being cautious and I wanted to just play to find out. I was fine with that. We took more time and spent more space there than my intention. And I think there's some spots now in hindsight. I'm like, I could have done this, and I could have brought in that. But I mean, that's GMing is you always go, if I would have, that would have been cool. But I didn't think about it till after I played, obviously, and then now have the perfect knowledge of what my characters were going to do. So, so I think it's fair, and I think a lot of this stems back to many years ago. You ran a session, and there was a fun scene in a bar, and I probably too uncharitably said like, hey, if you're going to have an NPC in the scene, they should like be there for a reason.
This is one of the, I have to put this out. This is one of the best piece of feedback anyone's ever given me. And I probably took it to heart too much at first and just like, spun the pendulum too far to the other side. But I think about this every single session without fail. It is ingrained in my head that every single NPC players interact with, because I love extemporaneously in character role playing with players and embodying NPCs. I will just kind of go on and on about some nonsense. And there are some times where I realize like we've been doing the scene for a few minutes and it has no purpose other than texture of the world. This NPC needs to have a purpose other than just me sort of, I don't know, having a nice time doing a funny voice. And again, I benefit from being reasonably good at coming up with characters on the spot. It's like something that I can do, and I have had to learn to leverage it to deliver rumors, to deliver hooks, etc. And I thought this was such a unique way to do it because I want to fast forward to how you used this in the session. It wasn't like we cut from the end of this gauntlet, which ended with our characters basically being led away by the guards.
Yeah,
like we were like,
away
hey,
for questioning.
There's some weird stuff happening in this creepy house that we just investigated, and they were like, we told you to stay right here. And we were like, but we went down in the house. The house was creepy. It was but there was a creepy guy, and they were like, well, you're going to come with us.
Well, we found blood where you were staying from, and we have questions because somebody was injured. And
yeah. What was great is that scene was then referenced later, right? Like we heard about people disappearing, and we heard about, the dangerous, kind of parts of the docks that those characters were staying at and that our raft is at. I'm just so worried about this raft. And the part that I thought was successful was that after the scene was over, that's when I finally understood why we were doing it. It was while it was happening, I was like, what are we doing here? It was fun. And then it revealed itself later. And I'm sure that there are additional breadcrumbs that we don't necessarily know about, et cetera, and look forward to, uncovering all of those things. My final question is your assessment. Like you already said, you wouldn't do this in another 10 sessions. I think this is definitely one of those novelty things. You do it, once in a blue moon, and it can provide a fun way to kind of break things up a little bit. But what was your assessment of this in terms of like success, doing what was there anything that you felt like was unsuccessful? You kind of already gave your feelings on it. I will tell you, I thought it was super fun, and just by my critique, so I enjoyed it. But what was your kind of overall assessment of its success and whatnot?
I think the number one piece I'm happy with about it is that I tried it at all. As weird as that sounds, it was so weird and such a departure, and in part of your critiques, like I think really valid, it was unnecessary. Like I have done that without asking my players to jump into level 0 characters for an hour to what ended up being closer to 2, and playing out that scene in that very strange way and learning about Salt Marsh from a different perspective. Could I have done that in a different way? Absolutely. It was a fun and novel idea, and we had fun doing it.
Yeah.
So for me, success. In the future, were I to use this new tool in my toolkit, I would want a much more clear objective. I think in a very general term, for a usable item, if somebody was considering this, well, is there a war somewhere? Is there a war going on somewhere? Or is there a war coming?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll give them 4 level 0 guards, and they're ambushed, and they die to the ambush. But the characters get to see the ambush happen to the wagon train or the supply line or the camp or the little village, or they get to go live through that. And now it's not, over in the next village over, we heard they got attacked. No. You kick open a scene and it's a festival day, and then horrible things run from the woods.
That's such a great idea.
And then,
I love that.
So you could something, I'll be honest, and I haven't said this yet.
I'm going to steal it.
Do it. Well, this was your idea originally.
What?
This whole thing came from something you said, and what you said to me was, and here's the wonderful circle of the episode, and the thing that you told to me, I will reveal in my closing thoughts when we come back from our sponsor.
Amazing. Dungeon Master Diaries is sponsored by Adventurers Greens, TM. The all-in-one powdered elixir for heroes who want to feel less like a walking corpse between rests. Look, let's get real. You've eaten nothing but stale rations, campfire rats, and very questionable stews for days now. But look, just with one scoop of Adventurer's Greens dissolved in water, ale, or a potion of your choosing. You get essential nutrients and vitamins, all blessed by the most highly qualified druids. You get a full serving of fungal myconids, TM, and a touch of necrotic resistance from some vermiculture. Feel energized, focused, slightly more immune with every sip. Right now, Adventurer's Greens, TM, is offering our listeners a free starter satchel and a collapsible tankard so you can take it on the go, and it's free to carry. Just go to drinkgreens.notacult and enter the promo code Green Things Are Good. That's Green Things Are, the letter R, good. Drinkgreens.notacult. Adventurer's Greens, because eating a balanced diet shouldn't require a constitution check. All right, Jody, let's bring this topic into the light. I think I missed saying, let's gather around the fire for our discussion, but let's bring this topic into the light with some of our core takeaways. You are going to start us off.
Well, you're going to start us off because you told me a while back, I don't know if you said it, I don't think you said it to me, you just said it, of GMing, show me the world, don't tell me about the world as a player.
It's pretentious crap.
Well, but you're not wrong. And it was, don't tell me about the battle that's happening over here. Don't tell me about the people that are missing. Let me see them in character and live in that moment. And I am a sucker for living in the moment. I love the dirt under the fingernails and the gravel underfoot and the mossy lichen dripping down the walls. And I'm into that stuff. So this whole freaking scene was, how can I show you the world rather than tell you about the world? So something that your characters would not experience, you as players got to experience. So that was the little nugget there.
I love that.
Because you said it.
I mean, that totally comes from just me really finding it hard to get through fantasy novels that are mostly what I feel are people. Let me tell you about my fantasy world. I could care less about your fantasy world unless it has a story in it. So my first takeaway is kind of similar to this show don't tell mentality, but I play to find out. You said play to find out, and I know that it's kind of a somewhat of a cliche nowadays, but playing through scenes and using play to tell the story. Again, I know it's cliche. I know that it gets kind of bandied about as advice that's maybe actually reasonably unhelpful, but I think this is such a good example of how you compare kind of a novel idea with play, and you can get some texture and interesting stuff out of the world.
I'm glad it did. We'll see. We'll see if those red threads, those breadcrumbs grow into red threads.
If they don't, you'll hear about it on the program in 6 months. People.
There it is.
I'm going to be furious.
All right, here's my other takeaways. Try new stuff. I took a gamble on this one. I swung big and went weird. And the only thing I'll tell you is try new things. Expand your toolkit. If there is something you've heard about like this and you're considering it, give it a go. But I'm going to stick a big old but in here. But let your players know you're trying something weird. Just give them the out of hey, I'm out of my comfort zone. Play along with me and see how it goes. And then try and keep yourself to a time limit. Maybe, like I said, I was hey, about an hour. And then we got closer to the 2 hour mark. And I was well, but you guys were driving it. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, I really enjoyed the trying something new. I now have this in my pocket, and in the future I can grab it or not.
So I want to flip it around and say, from a player's perspective, be open to weird, random crap that your GM wants to try. And even, I would even say, be, just as the advice is given, I'm just doing the cliche advice thing, just as the advice is given to GMs, be fans of your characters, be enthusiastic and fans of your characters. Be enthusiastic about your GMs trying stuff, getting out of their comfort zone, even if it's wonky, even if it doesn't work. Try and make it better. I feel like there is such a dearth of players who are willing to lift their GMs up. We talk about this all the time, how we need more GMs. We need more people who are willing to get behind the quote-unquote screen. Well, it'd be a lot easier if we had players who were there who were like, dude, I'm going to try and make you feel like you're a great GM by buying into the story, by buying into what you want to do. I felt like we had 4 players who were like, dude, I'm game. You want to try something weird? Let's try something weird. We're going to give it the old college try. It might crash and burn, but honestly, it probably won't because everyone wants it to succeed. So I don't know. As a player, this is something that I have been working on throughout my time, trying to become a better player. More on that maybe in a future episode at some point about my growth as somebody.
We're going to talk about your growth on a future episode?
Ah, it's disgusting, Jody. It's
disgusting.
It
was from our sponsor.
Athletic. We
better get to the outro quick.
All right, here we go. Do it, Jody.
All right, as the torchlight grows dim and we can still do the podcast, we hope you were able to find something useful in this episode that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or a unique experience from your table, did you try something weird and you'd like us to discuss it on a show? Well, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can reach out to us via YouTube or on Facebook, or best of all, on the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadow Dark Discord channel. You can find links to those feeds and any of the materials we referenced in this episode's show notes. Until next time, may your taverns be light and your shadows be dark.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. And Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadow Dark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library, copyright 2023. Mouth is so dry.